as a housewife in rural Ohio. In 1988, we were given a lovely plot of land to build a house on. Never mind that it was next door to my in-laws because they owned the land. I was married to Bill Neal, and I said to him, I said, listen, really don't want to be next door to your parents. No disrespect intended. Let's go look for a piece of land to build a house. If we cannot find a piece of land as nice as this, then we'll build a house here. Well, be careful what you ask for, right? And it was indeed, that was the nicest piece of land anywhere around. We were on top of a hill. It was given as a gift to me. I remember my late ex-father-in-law came over one day on my birthday with a bouquet of flowers and a deed to the land. He handed it to me instead of to his son. I thought that was very sweet. And so we decided to build a house on this 2.5 acres of land. And we found this couple who later became our lifelong friends who would build a house for us. And so we broke ground. And the very first day, this team was framing the house. I was there the entire day. I've never seen a house being framed before. 2 master carpenters and some helpers. This whole framework of the house. And I stood there absolutely fascinated watching these master carpenters at work. And so finally about 6 o'clock, they shut it down. And I was watching the oldest of them, the master carpenter. There were 2 of them. He walked around the frame and he took a square and he checked every joist, every corner. And then he just burst out into this litany of swear words. It would make a sailor blush. He was very, very angry. And he said, nobody moves. Nobody goes home. Take it down. What? I hope I'm not paying for this. I hope I'm not paying you guys by the hour. And he just screamed blue murder. He said, take the whole thing down. So I went up to him. I said, hey, what's the meaning of this? He says, look at this. It was a quarter of an inch off square. This is off square. It's not perfect. So for 1/4 of an inch off square in this big building of a house, it was a 5-bedroom house. It was a sizable house. He said, take it down and take it down now. Nobody goes home until we've taken this down. Tomorrow we start again. I was horrified, flabbergasted. So later on, I got to become more familiar with him and I pulled him aside one day. Now, I had a contract that if they complete the building of the house in 100 days, I will cook a 10-course dinner with it for the entire team. And I did. And I had a friend made a cake that is modeled after a 3D model of the house in cake as a celebration. But I just thought, why would you do that? You know, there are like 10 people of labor all day long putting this stuff together and you take it down. Can you imagine the cost? Of course, I wasn't charged the time because our contract was not built on time. Our contract was built on project, thank God. So he said, do you know that this 1/4 inch is going to be multiplied so many times throughout the house, and I would not put my name to it when this house is finished if we didn't fix that. And in order to fix that 1/4 inch, everything that is built on that 1/4 inch of mistake is a mistake. And if you don't take it apart and clean it up and do it again properly, then you will forever be living in a mistake. Why did this man just come into my consciousness today? That day, besides paying my builder who hired him, it turns out that was the last house he built. He died the following spring. The house still stands today, beautiful as it was, very well maintained by my former husband. It's still a beautiful building, and it will outlive all of us. You know how when we look at some buildings in ancient cities and you see how, the pyramids were built thousands of years ago. The Great Wall of China was built thousands of years ago. Years ago, when I was at the King's Chapel in Cambridge, at the University of Cambridge, and I was looking at the amazing arches of parabolic arches in the ceilings. It's perfect. And they didn't have CAD, they didn't have computers to figure this out. It was done with very basic tools, and yet it was done with such perfection that the buildings still stand today. Nowadays, if you go out and look at buildings and buy houses, especially the tract homes where a developer comes in and they build 200 of the same design, you see how people cut corners. Those houses will not be around way after we are not around. So what makes something that sustains through time? There are certain things we have to do it right or it is not right. We cannot hang new drapes over old drapes. Doesn't work very well. I remember last year there was a house in the neighborhood and they were planning to do a quick sale, slapping on paint, and they put a new roof on top of an old roof. Right? Engineers in here know that it's not a good idea. So how does that translate to our lives? And I said, wow, that's a metaphor for the work we do as catalysts for change. You have to uninstall bad software before we can install new software for the new software to work uncorrupted, uncontaminated. So translate that to life for me, that little quarter inch. We go through life and we make a lot of mistakes. And then we don't want to talk about it. And we cover mistakes after mistakes on top of mistakes. And we wonder at the end of the day why we have such a big mess. So the work we do when we work with clients, one of the first thing is to figure out what got you here in the first place. And let's see if we can subconsciously go in and do a scrub. We have to, my students know, I said, we have to go find the poop and clean up the poop before we can proceed. Everybody has poop, right? We can't deny the fact that we all carry poop around with us all the time. And so there are times where we have to sit down and actually clean up the poop before we can carry on. That makes so much sense to me. Sometimes it may seem a lot of work. Sometimes it may seem a lot of effort and a lot of expense, but you'll be so happy to clean it up and start over than to build upon mistakes. You cannot build a good house upon a flawed foundation. That is the small shift that I learned that day that's helped me with first cleaning up my own poop years ago when my life was built upon several mistakes. That I figured if I didn't learn from the mistakes I have made, I would never be able to live a different life. It would just be geography.
my marriages, for example, the first one, I learned that I cannot be someone else. I tried to be somebody else in order to be loved. The second time, for 16 years, I also tried to be somebody else, to serve somebody else's career, to serve somebody else's purpose. And I know that didn't work. When I finally left that marriage of 16 years that gave me 2 beautiful children, I made a promise to myself. If I should ever get married again, he would be the luckiest person on earth, because I'm going to spend whatever time it takes to clean up my poop and to fix the mistakes I have made and to make amends. Until then, I will not share my life with someone else, because it's not fair to bring all my poop into the new relationship. That became my goal for a very long time. And when I started my life over at the age of 43, I said to myself, to the universe, I said, please God, I want to know what it's like to be happily married in this lifetime. That was my prayer. That was my goal. And I said, I'm not going to go out and look for the perfect man. I am going to go inside to figure out what it's like to be the perfect partner. Whoever out there who can see the kind of person I've become will be attracted to those attributes. And guess what? He found me. And after we got married, I looked at my notes that I had written, and he checked off every checked mark, and then there are many bonuses. Many bonuses. And the wonder is that, when I married him, it was so perfect, so wonderful, that I couldn't imagine that we could possibly love each other more than the day we chose to get married. And yet now, 20 years later, and I have data now, it's not speculation anymore. After 20 years of happiness and adventure, I can say that I have been truly blessed and my dreams did come true. Those of you who've read book The Secret, if you haven't, you should read it. I think it's written by an Australian woman, looking at the teachings of people like Viktor Frankl and Martin Seligman about positive psychology. What we imagine, what we give energy to, becomes our reality. I think it was Viktor Frankl who said that. If we put energy on an idea, that idea will grow and become reality. Now, that's good news and bad news in that. Good news is you can make your dreams come true. Bad news is you can also make your nightmares manifest. So oftentimes, it translates to looking around us. We're all living in the same time and space. There are people who look at a situation and they complain. If it rains, it's too wet. If the sun comes out, it's too hot. Nothing's ever good enough. They come home at the end of the day and they complain about every colleague. It's like, wow, you have a talent. You seem to have attracted every jerk in the universe to be in your office, because you not have one good thing to say about anything or anyone. Yada, 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 yada. And you wonder why when they walk outside, they step in a hole and break their leg. I actually had a client come to see me because of that. He was a supervisor for a cement company, and he had real bad anger issues. And one day he was too busy yelling at someone, he literally stepped in a hole and broke his ankle. And finally his boss said, if you don't take care of that anger issue,
Let this be your last warning. If this happens again, you have to find another place to work. You can't work for us anymore. So the very thing that the person is angry about, that if you didn't do this correctly, my boss is going to be mad at me, and then I'm going to lose my job, lose my house, lose my dog, and I'll be the homeless man in the street. You know what? He's actually manifesting that because he keeps getting very angry with people. So a small thing makes a big difference. Many years ago, I was involved with a group that we did firewalking. And literally, we walk over a 12-foot track of hot coals. And at the end of the first batch of training, we have to build 3 tracks of these 12-feet fires and walk around them 108 times before we can graduate. I mean, shoot, by the time you walk over it the 3rd time, it doesn't matter anymore. People say, how do you walk on? And let me take a look at the bottoms of your feet. You know, I still have my feet. And yes, if you put a steak on top of that track of hot coals, it would sizzle. Up until today, it still baffles me. I don't understand the science of it. But I do know, not only have I walked on it more than 108 times since I became an instructor after that, I have also done advanced training where we actually stand on the hot coals for a few minutes. And you can put a piece of steak in the hot coals. It will sizzle at the same time you're standing on it. How does that work? I don't know. What does it feel like? I can tell you what it feels like standing on white hot fire. How is that possible? It's all in your mind. I think what is most powerful within ourselves that we don't explore is the fact that we have the power of our minds. Totally understated, totally misunderstood. What we can conceive in our minds, we can manifest in person. Give you some examples of things that you can choose if you choose to stay in the positive. I remember a long time ago when I was a young girl at school, I was a member of the school's netball team. I was one of the shooters. Only 2 people on the team are allowed to put the ball in the basket in netball. There's 7 aside. So I would stand within the boundaries of shooting, and when the ball is in the other person's hand and they are shooting, there's nothing I can do. Unlike basketball, you can't do interference like that. So I would stand there and use my mind and tell the ball to just miss the basket. It was a nasty thing to do, but you know what? It works. I would stand there and see the ball heading towards the center of the basket. I said, no, that's not where you want to go. Just take a little deviation to the left, and boom, it just touches the ring and pops out on the outside, never going in the basket. And after a while, I said to myself, Kwitai, that's not a very nice thing to do. But I learned that it actually works. Small things like that, but throughout life, I went through many years where I've forgotten I can do such things, and so can you. That I spend many years forgetting who I am, neglecting myself, forgetting myself, and letting other people direct my life. When I found that piece of me back again, with a lot of help, there was a point in my life where I left a coveted internship at the Cleveland Clinic. And I was devastated. My family was devastated. I was going to do this internship and then go out and get a job as a clinical dietitian. And due to certain disagreement of ethics, I decided to leave, because I told them, if becoming a dietitian means I have to subscribe to your brand of ethics, I'm going to leave that behind. It doesn't resonate with me. And that was a huge thing to walk away from.
Cleveland Clinic. It was a coveted internship. And I remember the first person I got to really sit down and talk to was Dr. Diane Ellensworth. Remember, you bought me breakfast at Bob Evans in Streetsboro, Ohio that morning. And you said something very profound to me. And you said in your usual jolly self, and you said, "Oh, Kuitai, I know this is so hard to hear, but one day you're going to look behind you and realize this is the best thing that ever happened to you." And I remember looking at Diana and said, "Are you kidding me? My whole world has collapsed and you're telling me this is the best thing that ever happened to me?" I don't know how many years later now, it's a long, long time ago. I can say thank you, Diane. That indeed was the best thing that happened to me, because otherwise I won't be doing this work. I'll still be working in a hospital as a clinical dietitian and checking off the boxes and not looking at the patient as a whole person. There was something in my gut that told me that I cannot work like that. That because I'm in a certain specialty area, I can't look at the other parts of the patient, that I'm only to attend to that part of the patient. I said they're not mechanical bits. There's a person that owns these parts, and I can't separate the parts from the individual. What change do we make based on small shifts? It is the small shifts that make the big difference. It's all about your perspective. Our perception is our truth. If you look at a cup and you say it's half empty, your life will always be half empty. If you look at a cup and say it's half full, you will find something good in whatever you see. However, if you choose that it's the wrong size cup, you fully exercise the power of your choice. So no matter what happens, that small shift will make a big difference in our lives. I know it has mine. But coming back to the carpenter, my grandfather was a carpenter. As I think, if I recall the Bible, Jesus Christ was a carpenter. And what can we learn from the carpenter's rules? Right, one of the things I remember the carpenter told me, you measure twice, cut once. So sometimes things are worth giving it time to consider. Patience was not one of my virtues. Everything I want to do, I wanted it done yesterday. But life has taught me that life happens when you have other plans, and some things require that you give it time to develop. So this particular carpenter that day, somebody in the team did not do all the measurements, but because he was the chief of the team, he took the responsibility. He was not angry at his workers. He was angry at himself for missing that piece and allowing the whole structure to be framed before it was fixed. And he knows he could have kept quiet and carried on, but he has too much integrity for his art that he said, I cannot let this happen. He knows he wouldn't lose his job because he's been with the company. He's like a father to the owner of the company. He knew that you cannot let something like that pass. Do you know what happened when that shuttle blew up with the teacher in it? I remember clearly I heard the boom. But do you know how that happened? Because one engineer person found out a small flaw in the whole system, and he was not allowed to report it because it would mean rescheduling the launch. Too much at stake. Do you know so many things in politics, in administration, that we cover up little mistakes that end up with huge, dire consequences? They found out little later it was one little pin about this size. that something was not right with it. I'm not an engineer, so I can't explain to you the mechanics of it, but I read about it. That little piece that one engineer found out that he cannot not report it, but he was squelched. It never went up to the right person who could make the decision to stall the launch. If we don't pay attention to small things, the small things will escalate and become gigantic disasters. And I think that COVID-19 has shown us this thing is so small, you can't even see it, right? You can't even see it. And yet, it has changed the world. It has changed all of us. It has affected all of our lives. We can sit at home and complain about this, or we can be grateful for the time we have that we otherwise wouldn't have because we're all too busy running like rats on a treadmill going nowhere, making more and more money to impress people we don't even know or we still don't even like. But the COVID has given us pause. Those of us who are fortunate enough, who didn't die, who didn't suffer physically or economically, if we sit and complain about it, then we will be contributing to a major disaster later. Or we can make good use of this time and say, what can I leverage this time with that is going to make a positive difference in the world around us? It doesn't have to be big. Small things like if I spend today and go out and just simply weed one section of my garden, I know that some plants will be happier, and I know that small things will make a big difference there. Trimming a bush, digging up a weed and giving the others a chance to grow. Small things. Making a phone call, talking to someone whom you haven't spoken to in a while, putting a spark of joy in their lives. People say, I don't have money to do this and that. There are 1,001 things you can think of today to do that does not involve expense other than your good intentions and your time. In the work we do as catalysts for change, when I work with a client who comes in, people show up because they're suffering. People suffering because they've made a series of bad choices. And so our job is to help them go back to the drawing board to find out where that original quarter inch was off square. Right? And the nice thing is, in hypnosis, we can tear down the whole structure in a few minutes and clean it up and reconfigure and rebuild a life and help a person instantly feel better. I know in the last 16 years, I had the privilege of helping people make phenomenal transformations in their life just by making one small shift. You don't have to spend the rest of your life hating the person who hurt you 25 years ago. And then you carry it and you talk about it and you make it bigger and heavier. And very soon you are crushed under this huge rock that you have created. Now, very interesting, recently I had a conversation with a friend who's in her 70s. And she said at 50, she had to start over. She lost her business, she lost her marriage, she lost her home. And so she said, I needed a break. So she needed to do something that has nothing to do with her law practice. And she has a friend who was the coordinator of volunteers for hospice. So she went and served as a hospice volunteer for a while. Has nothing to do with her work. She needed a break. And she said that really changed her perspective, because when we serve someone, we forget ourselves. And we are able to tap into a part of us that we don't use, a part of our energies. And so she was able to feel differently as a hospice volunteer, and also it gave her a perspective she's not seen before. We don't talk about dying. We certainly don't work with people who are dying. It's a whole new perspective. Now, what was interesting, she had discovered in a woman being 50, she went to see the doctor and they found a bunch of fibroids in her uterus. In the work we do, energetically, the energy that's in our groin, sexual energy, is creative energy because it is in our uterus that we create another life. It came to her, you have a lot of creative energy that you're not using. Clearly, you're not producing children anymore, and all that energy is not going in the right places. You're not expressing your creativity, and all that excess energy has to go somewhere. They turn into fibroids in her uterus. If you should engage in something creative, things may change. And she launched into a whole new career in helping people. And the fibroids went away. Now we know in the work we do that we have a thing called organ language. People are stuck in certain parts and those energies are not expressed. They ultimately become physical problems. I had a client with warts, 31 warts on her hands, because she worried so much. When I taught her how not to worry anymore, the warts went away. You think about something, you've already given it energy because you think about something. Just imagine if you say, I'm going to be late driving from Melbourne to Sydney. I will meet every obstacle in the highway, every red light. Guess what? You are going to meet every red light, every obstacle in the highway. Or students will say to me, oh, I'm so scared I'm going to fail this exam. I said, then go home and go to the movies because you already failed. Because you imagine yourself already failed. And people who are about to give a speech and they just think themselves into a frenzy before they get on the stage, and then when they open their mouth, they stutter. Wonder how that happened? Nobody gave it to them but themselves. People die of fright because they scare themselves to death. Same person, same situation. But if you just shift that energy from one polarity to another, you can't create nor destroy energy. You just make that shift. And things will change. Now, granted, the carpenter can't think away that quarter inch of error. It needs to be fixed. Some things need to be physically fixed. But many things that have not happened yet, you can change. I tell people, I can't change what happened to you in the past, but I can help you stop suffering from the effects. Right? You can now think about the man who hurt you without any emotion. Don't spend any emotion there. You don't have to love him again and take him home to dinner, but you can look at him and be totally neutral. Sometimes you look at someone who's hurt you and you go right back to the day when he hurt you and you go through it over. A coward dies 1,000 times before his death. He's already hurt you once. Don't give him the benefit of hurting you the rest of your life. Another thing I learned from this carpenter, mistakes can be fixed. Might be expensive, and he felt it was worth it. It was one day's work, then a lifetime of mistakes afterwards. So he thought it's no brainer. You can't build a house when it's a quarter inch off somewhere. Tear it down. So when we know we've made a mistake and we don't go back to fix it, it's going to layer upon layer and turn into a disaster. So one of the things I learned from walking away after 16 years of marriage in Ohio, I have decided that I will speak up. I'm not going to swallow things. I will speak up. I will fix things. If I have made a mistake and hurt someone, I'm going to go back and fix it. I'm going to put my ego aside. If I have hurt you in any way, I would come back and ask for forgiveness. And better yet, I'm not going to say I'm sorry, because to say I'm sorry simply asking you to excuse me. I don't want to be excused. I want you to give me a chance to make it right. Then I'm done with it. If you excuse me, I'll forever owe you in karmic debt. And I'm kind of rather like to be a debt-free person, physically and psychically. So if I've done something to hurt you that I didn't know about, and you tell me about it, then I want to fix it. If you say, hey, Kuitai, remember, 20 years ago you come to visit me and you broke my grandmother's teacup. Every time I see you, I remember that day you broke my grandmother's teacup and I hated you for it. If I don't fix it, it would forever dampen our relationship. I'm just making a silly example, but you know what I mean. A lot of times when somebody did something and you're hurt by it and you say, oh, never mind, don't worry about it. Worry about it and fix it. If you value the relationship with the individual, speak up and fix it, and don't carry a bag full of stuff. 1/4 of an inch off square. One small thing, big difference. And that day I learned it is the little things that bite you. Anyone can work in crisis, but it's the little things that we ignore. Most accidents happen not because somebody is driving 100 miles an hour. I know if I'm pushing my car 100 miles an hour, I'll be fully attentive. But it is when I am just cruising along, looking at the landscape, and I forgot there was a stop sign. And I run that stop sign and cause an accident. It is those days where we think that we know everything, but we are totally unaware. Pay attention to small things. I remember one time I was at a cruise ship, and there's a casino on the cruise ship, and they have this little machine. They move a little bit. There are lots of cash on the thing, and the thing will move a bit, and the cash will fall in, and of course it never does. So I'm standing there. Of course, I didn't put any money in it. I'm standing there. There was no one there. I'm just standing there. I said, I said, make some money drop. And then all this money dropped. And there was nobody there, so it was mine. You can do that in direct healing. You can help someone feel better. You can do healing work on yourself. You can do healing work on other people. And you can even direct the phone to ring if you need a new client. I've done that before. When I was new in practice, I said, oh gosh, I've got an empty calendar for the week and I don't know where my paycheck is coming next. And so I looked at the crystal above my desk and I said, God, please give me a sign that I have made the right choice in walking away from my career to do this. And please give me a sign. And the phone rang. And that's when I say God delivers faster than FedEx. I got a client that same day. I know that this manifesting your ideas is a real thing. People say, oh, well, it doesn't work. I said, well, if you say it doesn't work and it doesn't work, it means it does work. I think the universe wants us to use this power for good. I teach my students dowsing and all that. I said, you can't take the dowsing rods to the horse races and say, pick the right horse. The dowsing rods want us to use it for the benefit of good. Benefiting just your pocketbook may not always be a good thing. Perpetuating a gambling habit is not in your best interest. So the rods know, as your soul knows, and everybody has that little voice that knows what's right and what's wrong. We know going into something and it's not right and you still carry on with it. Deep inside you're not doing the right thing. Something is nibbling at you. And one of these days, it will take a big chunk out of you. Pay now or pay later. That's why I tell people there's no free lunch. You pay now or pay later. Always be responsible for your actions, and then you wouldn't have to create a big debt. People who cheat and steal and lie are merely accumulating disaster. It may not catch up with you in this lifetime, but the universe keeps score. There's no escape of your karma. At least the Buddhists believe that there's a cause and effect in everything. As I used to tell my students, I said, well, do you think you've done something bad if somebody at the checkout at Walmart, charge you $2.99 instead of $29, and you walk away and say, oh yeah, I got a good deal? Well, you didn't. Because now it's worse. You know about it and you did not rectify it. If you walked out and you didn't know, didn't think about it, it's one thing. But now that you know about it and you're celebrating it, yeah, you're in trouble. Small things can also lead to big disasters. So it works both ways. And so it is a good idea to be mindful, to be well-intentioned, to have compassion for yourself and for compassion for other people. I find that it's so much easier to travel light. Bear no grudges, build no grudges, and travel light. So on that note, I'm going to leave you this week and wishing you the best of intentions and wishing you many little things, small blessings that will bring you peace and joy. We'll see you next week. Thank you so much.